Hey everyone, it's Steve with Earth to Space Science, and I'm sitting here in the car waiting for my son to finish up his piano class, so I thought I'd just do a quick video on looking at the first freeze dates for different areas of the country. I'd done a blog about this earlier, but not done a video on it, so I thought I'd go ahead and put together a quick video going through some charts and data here, looking at when most areas of the country see their first freeze. So anyway, starting off here, let's look at a graphic showing a map of average first freeze dates across the country as a whole. You can kind of see by the shaded areas here which areas tend to see their freezes in September versus October and November. So everything in blue for the most part will see a freeze that is going to be before the end of September. So obviously most of the Rockies, a lot of the northern plains like the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of New England, everything in the green between light and dark green usually sees a freeze during the month of October. So that includes Chicago and Kansas City, even down towards Texas Panhandle like Amarillo, and then eastward towards Pittsburgh and down the chain of the Appalachians and up towards Boston and so forth. Whereas everything in sort of the yellow-brown colors don't typically see a freeze until the month of November, and that includes most of the Gulf Coast areas as well as the East Coast all the way up into New York City, where the urban heat islands and so forth tend to keep places like Philadelphia, New York City, quite a bit warmer than the areas that are just inland. So you can kind of see there how things go. Now the West Coast is very, very variable from year to year. Typically you'll see places like Portland and Seattle vary anywhere from October in some years to not until December. In fact, there are some winters where they won't even see a freeze until the very end of the year. So certainly it can vary quite a bit along the immediate West Coast there. But typically you do see a freeze, before the end of September coming up here across a lot of the Rockies as well as the northern parts of the plains and northern tier of the U.S. in general. So looking at city by city here, here's kind of a neat graphic I put together. This basically shows the average first freeze date with the dark blue lines there for each of these cities. And then you can kind of see the typical ranges of freeze dates. The gray bars indicate the kind of plus or minus 1 standard deviation of the mean date for those areas. And then the light blue bars indicate the extremes, at least going back to 1980 or 1981. I pulled basically data from 80 to 2017 to create this chart. So you can see the range of freeze days for most of these cities. So like Bismarck, for example, always sees a freeze by the middle of October, whereas a place like Birmingham, Alabama, or Dallas, or New York City doesn't even typically ever see a freeze before the middle of October. So you can kind of see kind of graphically here which cities are going to see a freeze early and which ones are late. But you can kind of look down towards, like I mentioned Portland earlier, the first freeze in Portland can range from the first half of October all the way until the end of December, so it can vary quite a bit there. But you look at a place like Bismarck and you almost always have a freeze within about a 1 month time period between early September and early October. So it can kind of, so in general, you'll see that the areas towards the West Coast, so in general, you see areas towards the coasts and across the southern U.S. tend to have a larger variation in the first freeze, whereas areas that are farther north sometimes tend to have a sort of a shorter variation. So even like Denver, for example, not as far north, but higher in elevation. So the freezes typically happen pretty early there, and their average first freeze date is actually just right after the 1st of October. So anyway, kind of a graphic there. You can kind of see how things vary from city to city. Pick out one that maybe that's close to where you live and kind of get an idea of the range of freeze dates that are typical for that location. So this plot here shows the data in a different way. It actually have every single individual freeze plotted, and then the bar, the sort of the shaded box there kind of gives you your standard deviation range, and then the dots kind of give you your extremes in terms of the earliest and latest first freeze. And so you can kind of see in a lot of locations the extremes are pretty limited in terms of frequency, and a lot of the dates tend to be fairly clustered into sort of some tighter groupings at certain time ranges, so you can kind of get a better idea of how the dates tend to vary with time. And so you look at a place like Dallas, for example, they've had a few freezes that have happened as early as late October, but the vast bulk of freezes there tend to be during the second half of November into early December, so kind of gives you a different way of looking at the data in terms of freeze dates for this handful of cities here that I pulled together for this situation. So anyway, that's just a quick look at the first freezes. We're heading towards the end of September now, and so most areas of the country are going to be starting to see their first freeze in the next few weeks as the pattern does start to turn colder, and we head into October when those become much more common. So you can kind of, again, take a look at that data, see when you might be expecting the first freeze where you live. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.